Let's take a look at if and if-else statements. These decision structures give us the ability to run different blocks of code based on a Boolean expression. If you're not familiar with Boolean expressions, be sure to watch the video on Boolean logic first. In order to get started quickly, I've already created a project, and I'm using top-level statements here. We won't worry about creating any methods for this program, but we will get back to those soon enough. Now, I love playing golf, but I'm terrible at it, so I'm in desperate need of some lessons. Unfortunately, I'm on an educator's salary, and my wife keeps discovering more Lululemon clothes that she says are more important than golf. I don't know about that, but I do know that I need to make some extra money. So I think I'll sell some of my old vinyl records. I'm going to write a program that calculates the total purchase price based on the number of records the customer wants to buy. Albums will be $30 each. That sounds expensive, but I really think there's an untapped market for vintage, lightly used Weird Al records. Customers will have to pay $10 for shipping, but I'll ship it for free if they buy 5 or more records. Okay, I've got my program created, and through the magic of video editing, I'll add a comment block at the top. As always, follow the required format if you're doing this for an assignment. And at the bottom of that, I'll add some test cases. It's easy to forget those test cases, so keep building the habit of adding them right at the start. They are worth points, and if you consistently leave them out, our magician friend can predict your future.
You shall not pass!
Test cases help us understand the code we need to write, starting with the variables we'll need. In this program, I have one input and one output, so I need at least 2 variables. That might not be the only variables I need, but I can create those 2 to get started. As always, I like to initialize local variables when I declare them, and as always, I'll initialize mine to -1. Lots of programmers initialize theirs to 0, and that's a good choice too. And I'm going to make shipping price a variable as well, because it might be $10 or it might be 0. And I'm going to make the album price a constant because it's not going to change while the program is running. The official convention in C# is to use Pascal case for constants, so I'll use album price, capital A, capital P, for the name of my constant. I'm going to add a note here to remind myself to get input later, because for now I'm just going to assign the value from my first test case to the num albums variable. As I've said before, I usually save input for last because it's not the most important part of the program. What I really care about is whether or not we use if-else statements correctly. So we're going to focus on that and then circle back to the input. And notice that I'm labeling the parts of my program here because as beginners, these are the same sections you'll use for most of the programs you write. The math is really simple. The total price is the number of albums multiplied by the price per album plus the shipping cost. And finally, I'll need to output the result. Notice that I have 2 $signs here. The first just tells C# that I'm interpolating some variables into the string, outputting those variables. The second $sign is part of the output. That will put a little $sign in front of the price just to make it look a little prettier. Okay, let's run this and see how it looks so far. It looks good. Notice that the price only kinda looks like a currency value. As beginners, we don't worry about that stuff too much. Again, we're just wanting to make the program work correctly. And to make sure it's working correctly, I'll change my assignment statement to my next test case value and run it again. As I go through these values, we see that it works until I get to 5 or more albums, because obviously I haven't written the code to waive the shipping fee yet. We need the program to make a decision about the shipping cost, and we'll do that with an if statement. There are a couple different ways to do this, but I think I'll just add the if statement right before the shipping cost is added. In my if statement, I can just set the shipping cost to 0 if the customer is buying 5 or more albums. We'll start with the if keyword, followed by a set of parentheses. Inside the parentheses, we're going to put a boolean expression that determines whether the shipping should be waived. They have to buy at least 5, so I'll start with this boolean expression. And a code block. Inside the code block, I'll set the shipping to 0.0. I'll also put a little output here to let the user know what's going on. And let's test that. And as I'm running through my test cases here, I accidentally changed the wrong value. I need to make sure I'm changing the assignment statement. We're really close, but when they buy exactly 5 albums, they don't get the discount. This is where it's good to have thoughtful test cases. The calculation changes when they buy 5 albums compared to 4, so we call that an edge case. It's important to test edge cases, especially with if statements, to make sure our decision logic is correct. So I've made a really common mistake. My Boolean expression is num albums is greater than 5, but I need to use num albums is greater than or equal to 5 to include the edge case. I could also write it num albums is greater than 4, but I think the greater than or equal to syntax is a little more clear for most people. Let's test that again. Notice that I'm checking all of my test cases just to make sure I haven't broken anything that was working before. It looks like our if statement is good now. Okay, if I'm going to sell enough albums to pay for all that Lululemon, golf lessons, I need to entice my cheap customers to buy a little more and get that free shipping. So I think I'll add a message for customers who don't buy enough to get the free shipping. This means we're going to have 2 different blocks of code, and we only want one or the other to run. We can do that by adding an else block to our if statement. The else keyword immediately follows the if code block, and then we add another code block. Now we have 2 code blocks. If the Boolean expression is true, the first block runs. If it's false, the second block runs. I'll add my enticing message to the else block so people who don't get the free shipping know what they're missing. Let's take a look at this and try a couple different values. And another mistake here, I will go ahead and change that right to a right line to make it spaced out a little better. Okay, the last step is to take care of that user input, that to-do reminder I left myself. I'll use the console readline method to get the input, but I'll need a string variable to put it in. So I'll add the variable I usually use, which is string input. Now I can assign the user's input to that variable, and after that I can convert the string to an integer. Let's test that. And of course I forgot to provide a prompt, and that's important. I know what I'm supposed to type, but any other user will just be confused. Okay, I'm going to need to stop the other program because it's still running, and then I can start this again. And I'll just run through my test cases, hopefully for the last time. Well, it looks like my money problems are solved, so I'm going to wrap up this program and start shopping for a second home near a fancy golf course, or a mall with a Lululemon store. We'll look at some other things we can do with if-else statements in the next couple of videos.